Hi there, I'm Fletch the Source and I'm back with another tactical philosophy video, kind of mostly covering how I approach 4-3-3s, but also going into some general tactical philosophy stuff, things you might want to incorporate into your save, maybe things you're not quite doing yet to give you an edge in the game. And I'll go over some broad concepts as well as focusing on the 4-3-3. So I'm going to start off this video by saying I think it's a Art of War quote. Now I tend to quote the Art of War a lot, which seems maybe weird for Football Manager. However, someone did make a book about how the Art of War and football tactics or Football Manager can be incorporated, so maybe it's not that weird. I want to meet that guy. Let me know who made that book if you ever find out, and put him in contact with me because we'll be best buds. But the quote I like to use from the Art of War is, if you're strong everywhere, you're weak everywhere. Now, I struggle to understand that concept, as many of you will maybe misunderstand that or not quite grasp what being strong everywhere means you're weak everywhere means. So it's like, if we thought about it in terms of Football Manager, if you imagine that you are recruiting very well-rounded players in every position and no one kind of excels in anything, you just look for effectively no weaknesses and you just look for super well-rounded type players, you end up having a team that's weak everywhere because there's no specialists, there's no strengths. So if we think about it in terms of attributes, if you think about a team where everyone has 10 to 12 for every attribute, you'd end up with a kind of weak team because you won't have anyone that excels in certain areas. And then if you look at examples in real life like Liverpool, you'll see like Trent can't defend as well as some others. So there's a vulnerability on that side. But you also get the amazing world-class playmaking from Trent. So that would be your strength. Most teams would take that deal as opposed to having a very well-rounded standard right back. Zinchenko, amazing on the ball and build-up, bad in defense and 1v1, stuff like that. So if you accept, yes, everyone would like to get their team as strong as possible and have no weaknesses anywhere, but you'd often be doing it at the expense of not having super strengths in areas. So we can also think about that in terms of shape. If you're strong everywhere, you're weak everywhere. Because when they're referring in the Art of War, they're talking about in military. They're saying like, if you send army to protect every area of your country, you're just going to be weak because your army's thinned out. If we look at it in terms of Football Manager tactics, yes, this is an extremely balanced formation. It has no obvious weaknesses, even though we will go into some weaknesses of this formation. And in real life, it's one of the most commonly used tactics because of the balance and well-roundedness of the formation. It seems to cover all areas. I know a lot of people like, I don't even know what the thing is, this. They love using this to determine if a tactic's good or not, which is funny to me, but I understand if you want to use these parameters and these things. And 4-3-3 tends to cover most of these boxes. So people like, it seems appealing if you are a slave to this bar, and this. If you're a slave, where's the analytics? If you're a slave to this and this and this and the stars maybe, I can understand why you'd want to play a 4-3-3 and why you want to play this way. Now, before I get started into basically ripping apart 4-3-3, I know I was worried about making this video because I know that so many people love playing on a 4-3-3 and a lot of people are not going to like what I say about the 4-3-3 in general. In real life, it's used extremely commonly. Not like this, however. This would be more of a Liverpool style 4-3-3 early days of Klopp with the attacking wing backs and maybe these guys narrow. That tends to not be the case so much anymore. You'll nearly always have an inverted fullback or a inverted wing back stepping into midfield, inverted fullback stepping into defense, something like that. That does make your attack somewhat rigid. I'll just cover that. Even in real life, teams can become quite predictable by shifting into that. Doesn't give them necessarily the overlaps, doesn't always give underlaps. If you have these 5 as your designated defenders and these 5 as your designated attackers, can become quite rigid. So you need, in Football Manager, those kind of rigid things like inverted fullback, DM on defend, less mobile roles are kind of less effective, and you'll get much less creative things happening as opposed to having mobile fullbacks, mobile midfielders, other players that can come into the game. For example, when teams play like this with volantes, you've got a variety of different attacks. So if you had this example of a 4-3-3, you'd have a bunch of players with this as a volante, this is a volante. You'd now got real dynamism. So you can see with this versus the original 4-4-2 that I showed, you really lack some dynamism if these guys were, say, an inverted fullback on defend and inverted winger on support. You're quite limited in terms of, this is very much a defensive unit, this is an attacking unit, and that does make sense, but it makes it quite predictable. And one of the most effective ways of creating chances is to get defensive players into attacking positions, because the least defensively capable players are not going to track them as sufficiently. So the logical thing is getting defenders to defend, attackers to attack. The illogical part of that is attackers are on natural defenders and defenders are on natural attackers. So it kind of negates each other, where you need extra quality in defense and extra quality in attack, which is why the top teams utilize this, because they're going to use their superior defenders against inferior attackers and superior attackers against inferior defenders. I hope I said that the right way around. So that's just a bit about how I feel about the 4-3-3. This is a formation. This exact shape is a shape I literally never use. If I am to use this shape, it will be in a different variation, like such, with inverted wing back. Something like this is something I would do. Or the other variation of it would be like so. I'll explain a bit why about this later, but we can just jump in right now and talk about some of the weaknesses of the 4-3-3. Kind of, even though it's really well balanced in terms of its coverage, it has some clear weaknesses to me, which are these areas are hard to defend, and number 6 is going to have quite a tough time getting across to deal with and defend all of this. That is going to be a significant challenge. So if you are ever considering to implement this, keep in mind you want your number 6 to be a god tier defender and to not really be involved in getting forward too much, because he's going to have to deal with this situation. Now, my biggest problem with the 4-3-3 is the distance from the wingers to the striker and the other attacking players to the striker. So the striker is often left isolated. So we'll go back to this example. When I'm referring to a 4-3-3, I'm talking about the conventional 4-3-3, which most Football Manager players have used and implemented at some point in their save. I'm sure everyone has played with a formation that looks somewhat like this. So you have these areas as difficult to defend from the number 6. Now, you could say, well, what I do, because I've got amazing 4-3-3, is I get these guys as inverted wing backs and they sit narrower. So this is how I deal with this situation. Now, to get any natural width, if you are going to do this, you will need your wingers to stay wider. This is kind of a common thing that's used in real football tactics. The big negative of this is your distance now between the winger and the striker, and your ability to link up with the striker has now become a lot less efficient. So what you could say is, okay, what I do is I play my guys narrow. Obviously, you've got really super narrow formation now. Or you could say I play my wing backs again wide and these guys narrower, which goes back to this problem of too much space here and the number 6 having to do too much. So the areas I look to attack when I'm playing against a 4-3-3 or exploit are these areas here. And then this area here is the one that is hard to put pressure on for the natural 4-3-3. Another thing, I'm going to just reel off things I don't like about the 4-3-3, and I'm going to get so much hate in the chat from people that basically only ever play 4-3-3. Keep in mind one thing. If you're successful with 4-3-3, it's going to be against the AI. I'm sorry to shatter your dreams, but if you play against any of the top 20 ranked Football Manager players, they're going to be so happy if you play a 4-3-3. I've literally never seen anyone win a ranked or competitive tournament using a 4-3-3 in the last 2 Football Managers. I've not seen it, so we're going to get into why it doesn't work as well in Football Manager. So this is the example of the narrow wingers. This is not a bad press, and I don't mind it so much. It's all right. But again, it leaves these areas exposed if you're going to press narrowly. If you're going to put these as strikers or whatever. If you have them wide, which makes sense. This is like the Pep theory. You get your high wide wingers. It's something that works well in real life to create spaces here. This is the goal. You stretch the pitch. However, in Football Manager, this press, like obviously teams don't press like this. So in real life, what would happen is Pep would have these wide wingers, but when he comes to press, it would look more like this. He would switch to something like this, right? Because this is a more efficient way to press, a better way to press. De Bruyne would step into the striker role or something. If you were to just do it Football Manager style, because you're unable to tell your guys to tuck in out of possession, and stay wide in possession is something that's challenging to get to work on Football Manager. What happens is you've got a really ineffective press because this is too easy to press through. Now you could argue as well that if you want that you're pressing with kind of a 5 players, which is more so than most, which would be like a 4. If you play a 4-2-3-1 against 4-2-3-1, you'd be pressing a 4 against 3. However, if the press is bypassed, okay, we play out from the back, whatever. We play out from the back with our goalkeeper. We get it to the 5, plays it to the 6. He takes a nice touch, boom, and finds the winger. We've just surpassed 5 players now, and you're left here. You're left here with this situation. So there's a risk that if the press is bypassed, you've committed 5 players to the press as well. Again, why I liked rather having the attacking midfielders up here and then the wingers back here. This press, at least these guys are able to recover and get back more so than these guys. But I hope you can kind of see the vision of what I'm like, the clear weaknesses that are happening already. Even against the 4-2-3-1, which matches up well with this is like one of the most common things that happens in Football Manager or in real life tactics. There's a 4-2-3-1 will play against a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1 against a 4-3-3. You've got the man for man here, and then you've got the 2v1 in attack and defense. So it's just the -1 in defense. This is how you would refer to it. However, if this player is extremely good off the ball and dangerous, and like you've got a shadow striker here or an attacking midfielder that's got roam from position, move into channels, extremely mobile, quick number 10. If every time you move over to a flank, this player is going to get involved with the flank. And to me, this looks much more difficult to defend. This is why in previous videos, you would have heard me use a single pivot formation at times, but really try to avoid not having a double pivot because I feel like defending this is much harder with one player. Again, if someone says I have an inverted wing back, that's cool, but you're not getting overlaps as part of your attack. If you said I have an inverted fullback and you drop to this, you're lacking creativity down this flank, you're not attacking. So there's a give and take for everything. That's what I mean by as well covering the topic of if you're strong everywhere, you're weak everywhere. So I would like to have a kind of specialized strength and area of focus to attack in my team. And with this balanced kind of tactic, you don't really get the privilege of that. Especially the more rigid, excuse me, and especially the more rigid it gets in terms of mobility and the ability to get around and get into attacking positions and leave your marker and get superiority by using a extremely attacking player like this. Some would argue that he's not that attacking because there's whatever, but he's rapid. So he can get up into these spaces and get back, which is great if you're going to utilize a player like this. Now, I don't want to contradict myself too much because some things are very niche. However, if you find something extremely balanced, let's say this, like fullback on support, they don't run wide with the ball, they're not narrower necessarily, winger balanced, you don't, unless you've got an insanely good couple of players linked up together. We could use Odegaard and Saka as the example for Arsenal and their tendency to want to go down the right because that's where they're strongest. So they're considering them, they know they're weaker on the left, so they tend to focus things more down the right. So yeah, in terms of its press, I don't think it's great. In terms of its build up, it struggles as well too. So in terms of its build up, it's building up with a 5 instead of a 6, and a 5 like this with an extremely tough situation. Again, you're going to need the pivot to be amazing. Most teams will press you like this. A 4-2-3-1 is so much in a better, more solid structure here than a 4-3-3 that needs to find the pivot, that needs to then find one of these guys. And if there's a turnover, this situation is really vulnerable. You've seen it many times with Liverpool. This is why in modern tactics, teams go into a back three. Again, you can do that with inverted fullback, but that's another thing you'd give up in terms of lacking attack. So how would I approach going against a 4-2-3-1? And we'll do, how would I go against approaching a 4-3-3? And where does it matter who's good and who's not great? Now, if you've got two centre-backs that are amazing and maybe a pivot that's great, one of the things I like to do is use a 4-4-2, maybe get one of these guys as a false 9 or target forward on support, someone who's going to drop in, and I look to overwhelm this middle and get players either side of this DM. So when the DM comes to press and goes to approach the deep line forward, we leave a bunch of space here. This is a struggle that the 6 will have. Again, if I know that someone's playing naturally narrower fullbacks like this, I'll definitely put my wider players on stay wider and move my fullbacks inside like this. This will give us our natural width. I'll use things like wingers on support, stay wider, hug the touchline. They're going to get the space to go around into things like this. So it's about, one of the things, main things I look at when I'm playing against a 4-3-3 is, are they going to play with wide wingers? Are they going to play wide wing backs, not wingers? And are they going to play narrow or wide fullbacks? That's something you're going to see early, quite quickly in game. When you play matches, you'll be able to see this. Or if you look at one of my main hacks or tips, you can call it that, is one of the things I like to do is go to a team. I click the team, I click the manager, and then I'll look at the formation and I'll look at the style. Often from the style of play, you'll be able to tell if their wingers are going to be wide or narrow. This is a thing that you're going to have to play around with and look at before you can determine this. But you're going to click each player, each manager before you play them and look at this. And in other games like Premier League and stuff, if you play in the Premier League or any top flight league, you're going to click this, click the manager, and it's going to tell you loads about the manager and the style they play and what they tend to do. So you're going to get an idea just from that whether what type of 4-3-3 it's going to be. For example, if it's against Pep, you know it's going to be a bit more of one of these type 4-3-3s. It's going to have some positional play and stuff like that, and Pep style roles they're going to use in Football Manager. So you thinking of a way, like I've just said, this is what I would do. But what I want to kind of instill in these videos is options, what you could do. And I don't want to tell you that your ideas are wrong. What I want is you to look at a team and think where the strengths are, where you want to position players based on them strengths, and how you can see this and what you can see happening. For example, if you know there's a fullback, they're going to drop into defense when a team has the ball, you can approach it like you're playing a back three. So a 4-4-2 becomes a natural counter to that if a team is playing with a halfback, as opposed to, say, this. The halfback drops in here. This is going to give a lot of space for your 10, and things like that you can think about. There's a different variety of ways to play. And if you want to match up, this would be what I would call the -1, a neutral way of playing. Your -1 here, sorry, your +1 here and -1 here. I don't want to keep misspeaking because it can get confusing. And then your man for man everywhere else on the pitch. Very normal setup, pretty much happens in every Sunday league level, every football game kind of looks like this. Then you can, or if you wish, you can match up like this and look to get players in space. You can stretch the pitch if you want to, if you believe the fullbacks are going to be narrow. And if you want to, again, we're going to cover the same thing of what I do. If I believe they have narrow wingers and wide wing backs, and I believe that nearly every position on the pitch, I'm superior than them in 1-for-1. One of my favorite tactics I like to implement because I don't get to play it very often. But if I am playing against a 4-3-3 and I believe I'm superior everywhere on the pitch, I really look forward to playing this tactic. It's one of my favorite tactics. I don't get to use it often because I don't feel that it's great against too many formations. Like, I don't find it an amazing formation unless I am specifically doing it for this reason. So this would be man for man. We know they got wide wing backs. We can push our wing backs up on theirs. This is your man for man. And then we can push our strikers on the centre backs for a really insane press. Now we're pressing with a front five, man for man, real intense press. And we know this narrow front three is going to be dealt with by our three centre backs. So one tactic I really look forward to playing. I'll show you my version of that if I have it saved. Normally I save my tactics as versus and then the opponent I'm going to play. But I'll see if I got my 3-4-1-2 anywhere. 3-4-1-2, there we go. So this is my 3-4-1-2. This is what it looks like. 2 advanced forwards, 2 wing backs, 3 ball playing defenders, a volante on attack and a reducer on support with get further forward. So we've got this like dynamism, the guys running, creating superiority through the middle, leaving their markers, wing backs leaving their markers respectively as well, and then an intense press for every player on the pitch, our shadow striker all over their DM. That is something I would do against an opponent who I thought was weaker in terms of their players, and a 4-3-3 that I didn't think was too great. We'd just exaggerate everything and kind of push it to the limit like so. Now, if you're playing a team that's far superior to you, that's not something you can consider. That would be a bit much. So we then bring, and one of these could be a defensive winger if you chose to. If you wanted one of these guys to be even more attacking and put him a defensive winger, if you wanted them to man mark the fullback, you could do that. Again, I'm not wanting to give strict rules on what you must do. I'm giving you a kind of options and ideas of if you want to, if you're a big favourite and you're playing against your Man City, you're playing against a bottom league team that's playing a 4-3-3, I'd just match up man for man and just tear them apart. There's not really any place they're going to excel. This is what I do. And then if I was playing a tougher team, I would think about considering a 4-2-3-1, and then depending on what they are trying to do, say they have wide fullback, I might sneak these guys in for a narrow kind of 4-2-3-1. We got a good amount of examples of that in my tactics, where we'd have narrow and offset 4-2-3-1s. Maybe not that, but like this kind of thing, like this. We might do something like this and look to block off the center, especially if a team, generally if a team is playing a 4-3-3, they will have an incredible 6, so you'd want to think about how to deal with that. And if you want to force the ball to the wing backs who are not great, you could play really naturally narrow like this. Now, if they do have amazing fullbacks, and you can tell it was kind of like the 4-3-3 that I showed you in the first example, which was like this with wing backs, you're going to have to consider the fact that these wing backs are going to get up like crazy in this formation and become really dangerous. So that's something you're going to have to consider and work out what you want to do with that also. Maybe by having wide wingers yourself to deal with this, sit your fullbacks narrow and do something like so. Have this guy on roam from position, move into channels, hope that same as the advanced forward, roam from position, move into channels. You could do something like this. I think the 4-2-3-1 is just much more defensively sound, has more ways, more variations to attack, particularly when it has volantes and wing backs. Offers a lot more attacking threat. Plus you have a player closer to the striker for link up, so the striker's not so isolated. I especially don't like a 4-3-3 when you're playing against the teams that have really, really good centre-backs, because then your striker's often going to have a bad game because you've got distance between your players and the striker, which makes it hard for him to receive the ball, hard for him to get a lot of chances, and you've got him doubled up all the time here. So that's one big negative I find of the 4-3-3. So if you look at some of the top tested tactics in Football Manager, like the top 300, top 200 tested tactics, none of them are going to be in this 4-3-3 shape. There might be a really rare occasion where you might find one. I haven't seen it in a long time. However, generally they're going to be a bit more spicy 4-3-3s. Or if I was to make one myself, I have found good use of getting a kind of double volante system like this, and then either with shadow strikers or strikers. So if I was to make a 4-3-3, it would be a kind of less conventional 4-3-3 that looks something like so. And this would be so my press is more compact. I have a bit more togetherness in the players. The distance between them is closer, and I'm using my wing backs for the width to get up. To me, this is a much more attacking version of a 4-3-3, something I may use. And the great thing about getting the volantes deep is you've got an extra player in build-up. You've almost got a 7th player in build-up, and I discovered this in a save one time. We had, I think it was Ceballos, and I was Palmer. And we couldn't get a performance out of Ceballos to save my life. I couldn't work out why he was just performing so badly. And it was due to his matchups and his positioning and being just hung out to dry here against the opposition DMs. But once we dropped him to more of a volante, or a regista on this side, he was able to get on the ball much more and basically excel and do what he's good at. So that falls into my other kind of philosophy of making sure that you've got players in close proximity to their best players to reduce time on the ball. Let's say the wing back was the best player or the winger was the best player, and we're the purple team. We want our best players to be on the ball. So if I had this and was attempting to do this formation, I'd want to make sure that especially the shadow striker was on the good pivot. This would be the shadow striker, and I'd want them like here, because we're at least making sure that these pivots don't have all the time in the world. One negative I worked out of playing this, I think I played a bit differently with wide wingers, but the point is that we were giving too much time on the ball to these DMs, which was one of the original problems I was saying about the natural 4-3-3, or the one that most players use, is that if you give too much time to these DMs and you're playing against a team that has great DMs, this is going to be a problem. Where, say you got these guys centre midfielder on attack, you would want them to be extreme. People ask me, why do you want these guys central midfielder on attack? Why do you want them get further forward, move into channels? Like the furthest forward, most attacking possible role here. And it's so you can put adequate pressure on the DMs that makes up for the fact that if your press is not successful, you're exposed with 5 players in the back instead of 6. So if you want to press with a 5-man press and you really want to commit to it, you want to make it be as successful as possible and not be kind of half-hearted in that press. So there's some kind of contradictory things in here, I'm aware. But what I'm trying to get through to you is that this formation has decent amount of negatives defensively, and attacking wise can struggle to get boost your striker. Now, if you have the most amazing, incredible striker ever, then maybe you can justify this. I still wouldn't want to necessarily use this shape, but mostly because of the fact that it's underpowered and easily countered by a 4-2-3-1. And then if you wanted to do mega attacking style 3-4-1-2, be cool too. And then it also has some problems against a 4-4-2. It has some positives against a 4-4-2. I've mentioned in the video where we said how to beat a 4-4-2, a 4-3-3 is not a bad option, because if you do have a great 6 in build up, this is getting your ball to your 6 is going to be the whole goal of this if you're playing against a 4-4-2. And you can utilize this well if you make sure this guy's like a register or something. But then again, register gets forward like this. If there's a turnover, you're going to be exposed again in this area. So yeah, I'm going to go back to the topic of where you're weak, you're strong, because I know some people probably will have some issues with like this concept. And the main emphasis on if you're strong everywhere, it means you're weak everywhere, is you want to have a weakness. You want to have an area where you're not as strong to be stronger elsewhere. And this is where asymmetric type tactics come into play, and you can make up for a lot of weaknesses in a system by doing something like this. You've got the natural width on this side, and then you've got an inverted wing back here. You'll have another really attacking central midfielder. You'll have the overlap on this side and the underlap on this side. Now this still brings in a bit of dynamism while being less predictable. And this is what we do in competitive football manager and in drafts. And when you get to a bit higher level, when you're playing against really tough opponents, not the AI. The AI is just a bot, basically. It's going to play just naturally underpowered formations and shapes, and it's not going to think deeply about how it's going to beat you and what it's going to utilize to beat you. So this is what I kind of want you guys to think about, is that being weaker, as in not being able to be as balanced, right? You're going to have this. Well, you won't have that so much if we do this, but you're going to have this, right? Red boxes. Everyone fears the red boxes. I'm telling you, don't fear the red boxes. The point of having a red box is that other areas are going to look like this. So I'm saying, when you're weak everywhere, when you're strong everywhere, it means you're weak everywhere. This is not necessarily a good thing. I wouldn't be proud of this. I wouldn't think that was great. I would be more proud of this, where I'm getting a red box, but it's for a purpose. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, 4-3-3 is not used too much in competitive draft, not much by top players, and that's just because the tactics haven't tested well and have all the natural problems in which I've mentioned. Yeah, generally teams that do it will have a great striker, but that's countered by the 2 at the back. You can work out if the wingers are narrow, you can bring in your fullbacks or wingbacks to sit narrower, and vice versa. You can have this system. This is something I would definitely use, a 4-4-2 with wingers on support, or a 4-2-3-1 with wingers on support. And this is how you can kind of negate the strengths of them. Again, one of my favorite things to do, and basically in this save, I'll show you, look how many, this is how many different formations that we play in a season. This is how many different, this system we played a lot of 5 at the back because of how I constructed my squad. Was kind of forced. I either played a 5 at the back or a 2 system, but we did change in games a lot. And then we don't have the data now. The data kind of expires, but we had a mixture of 4-2-3-1s and stuff. But in the first season, a lot of the teams we played against played in this 4-3-3. And what I was able to do was play this tactic. It was one of my main one I used. And that gave us superiority in the middle by having a natural 4. We had the best winger on their fullback, and we left a weak fullback alone. Always leaving the weaker fullback alone, the weaker offensive fullback alone. Probably, if they're good at defending, normally they're bad at attacking. It's hard in some leagues to get extremely well-rounded, great fullbacks, just only in the top level. But if this was the good defensive, this is what we'd do. And it would be absolutely devastating, because once the press was bypassed, once the three-man press was bypassed, and we find a winger out here, they've got all kinds of problems now. Because the six is going to have to come over to stop this pass. If it happens and this player gets the ball, we've got really, really dangerous 3 versus 3 situations where people have been dragged around the pitch. Now, a natural counter for this would be to drop this guy in to help, but still it's hard for this player to get all the way over to help with this superiority. So in the first season of this network save, a lot of people played the 4-3-3 before they moved away from it. And they have to move away from it because it was so easily exploited with a system like this. Even with this system, I used a wide wing back. So this wide wing back can get into this space. This wing back would attack down this flank, like so. And ball would develop. We'd have focus left, focus down the left, like so. Focus down the left here, right wing back on our overlap. Everyone's holding up the ball on this left side. Now we've got big superiority here, and this is a massive issue. So basically everyone stopped playing the 4-3-3 because it was so easily countered, and this would become devastating. We're getting these 5 players in between the lines, focusing our play here, getting the ball. This is too, in my opinion, this is too dangerous an area to want to sacrifice. And then if you don't want to sacrifice it, you want to maybe have these guys a bit more defensive. Every time you switch someone to, I don't know, a ball winning midfielder like this, you're like, oh, this is how I do it, because I want to. You're then reducing your ability to attack every time. So this is what we do. Put players in between the lines, get the overlapping wing back. This would become a devastating attack now and kind of impossible to defend from their perspective. And then it's also easily countered by standard 4-2-3-1s and narrow 4-2-3-1s and 4-4-2s. Like, a lot of things work really well against a 4-3-3, which is why I don't really agree with when they do tactic tests for like Premier League and they use, say, Man City, and they use an overpowered tactic. A lot of the times the managers in saves, in Football Manager, a lot of the AI is using 4-3-3s, and 4-3-3s with not that great roles for Football Manager. Football Manager, you want mobility, you want wing backs, you want volantes, you want inside forwards, you want the movement kind of roles where you're getting extremely attacking threats by bombing players forward, making stuff happen. But you'll see often in Football Manager, one of these guys will be like a DLP or something. I know when I laugh at saying DLP, like, I'm laughing because this is like what I consider like a bot tactic. And the reason is just the whole position is not great on Football Manager. It's not an amazing thing because mobility is so good, reducing a player's mobility and reducing his ability to kind of crash the box and get in here and cause havoc. I hope you're seeing where I'm going with this. I don't want to be too harsh because I know a lot of people, the weird thing is, when people make a tactic like this, for example, I don't know, say this is an inverted winger or whatever, when people, it shows that they have a good understanding of football and football in real life. And what I feel bad almost because say you had this like inverted fullback, I would see something like this with a DLP here that kind of drops in and a ball winning midfielder, let's say. Like, this shows a good understanding of real life football. Like, this should theoretically work, but just that match engine just favors mobility and mobile roles, and being able to attack in a lot of different ways tends to be more of the meta. Like, this is going to be way more dangerous in general than a standard 4-3-3, just especially if you've got like a wing back here that cuts inside or can go inside outside, doesn't necessarily have run wide with the ball or cut inside with the ball. You're going to have much more variety in how you attack and create, and all these players are getting forward, and stuff like that. So it shows people have an understanding of football, and it's the easiest formation to recruit for, I'm sure. This is the easy one. Like you're going to have no problem finding correct players for this system, this sort of setup. But too many formations easily counter this. And my point of, if I reared off of that, when they do the tactic tests, you see they're beating these bot tactics. I mean, I don't consider them too difficult tactics to beat. I have seen this utilized really well and has been played against me for specific reasons. When I've played certain formations, like if they've got a great six and they want to get him on the ball and do things like that. I've had a few examples where maybe we can find a 4-3-3 where they've beaten me. Like, look, this is 3-0, 6-0 against a 4-3-3. And then there's not many people in a network save are using a 4-3-3. Like, even when we play Toronto FC, sorry, not Toronto FC, what was it? Vancouver, they play a 4-3-3 DM, and we chose to play a 3 at the back, a 5-2-3 against them. Beat them easily, even though they're a better team than I am. You can utilize this, and because they were a better team than me, I wanted to have superiority here all over the pitch, and they're playing with their 4-3-3. This, we're always going to be able to build up successfully. We're dropping players in here in the 10 role, a area which I said could be exploited with a 4-3-3 if they have wide wing backs. And then we've got this, once we surpass this front three and find our wing back, we've now got 2v1 here, 3v2 here, and then the 6 is going to be in trouble, and this is another way. You could think of it like, every time I play a 3-4-3, I think of Chelsea against Man City in the Champions League final, how Tuchel was able to beat Chelsea by utilizing this. And then Man City put Gundogan as their 6 because they thought he's going to be much more creative on the ball and he's going to have way more time on the ball and he's going to be able to hurt them. But just the superiority here, and when the balls got out wide, obviously, I think it was Reece James had an amazing game, and they were able to get round City. And yeah, once you get your wing backs activated in this, you've got another opportunity. And this is where we want to kind of overload in the midfield. We're sacrificing the wing backs. But again, I'm going to emphasize for the last time, you're going to pick what you want to do against a 4-3-3, but you're going to evaluate each of your opponent's strengths and weaknesses before you do. You're going to think about the shape weaknesses of where you want to attack. You're going to think about where is natural space left behind the attacking midfielders in transition, where there might be space either out wide if they have inverted wing backs, or in the number 10 roles, number 8, number 10 roles, either side of the DM. You're going to look to always isolate the striker, and that's going to be easy because they're thingy false nines. Now, a 4-3-3 would work much better if a false 9 was like an amazing role in Football Manager, or maybe Shadow Striker was great and Strikerless was awesome, which it isn't right now. But if it was something like this, you see the proximity and potential for link up, it makes a lot of sense. But because the advanced forward is so powerful, and then the advanced forward, when it has something to support it, something closer, something in proximity to it, then becomes a much more effective role, because the ability to link up. How many goals do you see on Football Manager where it's like the 2 strikers are up front, 1 striker passes to the other and then he scores? Whereas in a 4-3-3, you don't get that as much. You're relying on a lot of individual brilliance from your wingers. You're relying on these wingers to be cut inside with the ball, contributing, dribbling, carrying the ball closer to the forward to score and things like that. And if you can get good ways to stop the wingers, there isn't much in terms of chance creation. And then I could hear someone also saying, I don't want to forget, say they play with like Mazzalas. Someone's like, oh, we'll play with Mazzalas to help this, and that will get our wide midfielders closer. Like this would have been a thing at some point that people would like to implement, which would be inverted wing backs and Mazzalas, and that these guys go on the outside and these guys cut in and do this. The big negative I see from doing so is you get these guys wide now, like so. And now we put no real pressure in the middle. We're vacating this. We've got link up. This can still be defended in a lot of scenarios. And we are now getting our players wide. We're very wide, cross heavy, not big distance between the striker, even more so now. And yeah, a lot of problems with the 4-3-3. If anyone loves the 4-3-3, obviously you're going to hate this video. But I would say if you're going to want to utilize it, try and think of different ways, and you can, to get the striker more effective and make this situation less vulnerable while still being attacking. And then think about how badly you match up in a lot of games against a 4-2-3-1, against some 4-4-2s, and against... So it doesn't work great against 3 of the most commonly used tactics, in my opinion. And now keep in mind, I'm referring to not the AI in terms of its tactics. I'm talking about good players who are going to utilize good formations and systems. So yeah, a lot of ways to beat the 4-3-3. Maybe in the comments you can tell me your ideas of what you think would be a good idea, or you can suggest something. I'll tell you maybe the problems, but there's always going to be some issues and some problems with it. You just have to work out what one you're willing to sacrifice or what you want to do with that. So yeah, thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for everyone who's subscribed and liked to this channel, who's made this channel grow massively in the last week or so. And thank you everyone for all the nice comments that you put in the chat and send me on Twitter and X. And yeah, thank you so much. If you want to join my Discord, join my Discord. I'll put the link in the description. Thank you guys. Bye bye.